Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the book launch of Renée Saklikar's Children of Air, India. Thank you for coming. Our profound apologies for those who were turned away from the event. We're at capacity now, so unfortunately we can't let anybody else in, but for those of you who have a seat, I'm glad for you, and there still are some seats in the front here if you want to catch a couple of more seats. First off, I would like to humbly recognize, acknowledge, and bear witness that this event is taking place on unceded Coast Salish territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations peoples. We'd also like to recognize a respected community activist of the First Nations community, Kat Norris, along with Corinthia Kelly, a women's rights activist in the downtown East Side. Thank you both for coming tonight. We'd also like to thank the Jansen, Dix, and Saklikar families for their support, and also we'd like to thank the families of the Air India bombing who are present with us today. Thank you for sharing this evening with us. With this evening's event, we walk a fine balance. The tone of the evening is both commemorative and celebratory. Commemorative in that the Air India bombing on June 23, 1985, is our country's largest act of terrorism, an event that murdered all 329 passengers and crew, including 82 children under the age of 13. One could say that this event is both overreported and underrepresented, and it's in this space between the two that we can appreciate, understand, and celebrate the work of Renée Saklikar in creating the first book of poetry in English that bears witness to this event. With redacted histories negated from a nation's archive, with the work filled with meaningful pauses and measured breaths, Renée has accomplished a marvelous feat, giving voice to silence, giving sound to the censored, a work of stunning remembrance, memory, and love. I've had the pleasure of being inspired by Renée for the past year and a half, discussing with her issues of race, the archive, identity, and history, among other things. When we first met, we spent about an hour and a half talking about T.S. Eliot, and then we went home afterwards and shared links with each other regarding the conversation. And we came up with a plan to create a series of Roses Are Red, Violets Are Blue limericks, which thankfully Renée has decided to put on the back burner, but perhaps it'll be your second book. So it is with great gratitude and graciousness that I'm happy to be celebrating with Renée today the launch of her first book of poetry, Children of Air India, Unauthorized Exhibits and Interjections. I'd like to call upon the stage Am Johal, the Community Engagement Coordinator at the Van City Office of Community Engagement within the SFU Woodward's Cultural Unit, to say a few words. Am.
Welcome, everybody. It's so wonderful to see so many of you. I wanted to just begin by congratulating Renée Saklikar on the launch of her book this evening, and she's also a graduate of SFU's in the Writer Studio program here as well. Renée asked me just to say a few words about our vision for community engagement here at SFU, and I'm just going to speak for a couple of minutes very briefly. I have some colleagues here, Shauna Sylvester, who's with Public Square, Laurie Anderson, CEO of SFU Vancouver, Mark Winston with the Center for Dialogue, and there's probably a dozen other people here as well, which it's so wonderful to work with so many people who are committed to that vision to engage in the community. Just working in this building the past 2.5 years, we now have about 50,000 people a year go through this building in terms of conferences, public talks, screenings, that are happening. And I think one of the things about Vancouver, where we placed one university on the edge of Point Grey, another on top of a mountain, when we place a building in a space in the heart of the city, such as this, it's very much a contested space. We're a city that's very polarized, and to have a public university, to be here, to be part of those conversations that need to happen in the city is vitally important. And certainly, just by way of example, tonight, Leanne Simpson is speaking in the cinema tonight. She's an Aboriginal activist and academic. There's over 250 people there tonight. They've just finished the event, and another 250 people are coming for a Tyee Solutions Society talk on affordable housing that's going to be moderated by Jackie Wong. Because the lights are so dim, I can't tell if we're over the fire limit or not, but both doors are open, all the safety regulations, and we have staffing in place. But welcome, everyone, and we're very happy to have you here this evening.
Thank you, Em. I would like to call upon the stage Silas White. Silas is the publisher of Blue Ointment Imprint and Nightwood Editions. Under his leadership, Nightwood Editions has become the flagship press for a generation of literary writers who emerged in Canada during the 2000s until today. He has also pursued an independent career as editor and author, with his editing of The Fly in Autumn by David Zerwith winning the 2010 Governor-General's Award for Poetry, Canada's highest literary honor. Ladies and gentlemen, Silas White.
So I certainly first want to say that on behalf of Nightwood Editions, we are extremely proud to be publishing this book, and that is in part because the bombing of Flight 182 is an event that, as Renée describes herself, and she'll address this more, always happens and never happens. But I'm much more comfortable in leaving it to Renée's words to describe this important book to you and those events rather than attempt to do it justice myself. Listen, and please purchase the book to realize its power and its brilliance. There are many copies available. We just had to run down to the car, I think, to get the next box. So please, if you didn't get a copy before the reading, drop by the book table in the back corner before you leave. But we're also proud to be publishing Renée Saklikar. It feels to me sometimes that this book has come together rather deceptively quickly. It's been about the past 6 months that we've worked very hard on this book, but really, it's one of those books I look at and I wonder how did we do this in half a year or even less than that when we really brought it together. But I think that the secret to that is Renée's actually been working on this book for many years. And she gave me a lot of material to edit, which was extremely engaging, and it was extremely engaging for me as an editor, and also extremely engaging for everyone else who worked at Nightwood Editions just immediately. And you can see that in the care that went into the book design as well. And she's also done a great job of promoting this book for many years, even long before she signed a book contract. And I think that shows in the incredible amount of people that is out tonight, that made it out tonight. And thank you all for being here. She's continued that unstoppable promotion, and she even mentioned in passing in a recent radio interview that the editorial process includes arguing, among many other things. And I have to admit, as her editor, that I would never, I challenged Renée, but I don't think I would ever dare to try to argue with Renée. I understand there's a professional debater in the back of the room, and I'm not sure that even he would dare to argue with Renée. And that's not because of her undeniable politeness, her grace, and her generosity, but it's even more because of her quiet and unequaled and formidable conviction. So that's why it's my honor this evening to introduce Renée Saklikar.
Thank you so much, Silas, for your kind words, and thank you all for being here tonight. Silas introduced Renée Saklikar, and Renée, who's doing the jobs of ushering as well, too. I invite you to come to the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, Renée Sarojini Saklikar.
So here we are. Thank you all so much for coming, and I'm so sorry for those of you who are standing in the back. There are actually a few chairs here, so if someone is really needing a place to sit, please come and let us know.
And Silas mentioned that the books have been replenished now. And for those of you
Buy a book.
Buy a book, exactly. And what we're doing now is going through some of the poetry that Renée has so graciously and so preciously written. And if you want to follow along, you can do that with us as well, too. So Renée, the first poem I'd like you to read is on page 16, and her redactions.
So Naveen and I have been having conversations about history and all the things he's talked about. And these are somber and serious and sometimes heartbreaking poems to read, to perform, and to listen to. And thank you for witnessing with me. And her redactions. Where were you born? Colloquial. Where are you from? Pune, India. Pune, India. Your father, name redacted, India. Your mother, name redacted, India. But you all Canadian? Yes, no, yes, yes. Your aunt and uncle, your cousin, India. Growing up, did you see yourself as part of a community? Newfoundland, Northern Quebec, Montreal, and then small town Saskatchewan, New Westminster, British. What's that? British. What is your purpose in telling this story? Mother, name redacted, she lost her youngest sister. Rogue fragments. What betrayals occur with each telling? Where is her story? Mother, who is daughter. She in her sari, who held you in her arms. She in her sari, big city girl, didn't even know how to boil an egg. Mumbai to St. John's, she in her sari, who married. What happened? Informant to Anne. You will need to take out your own story.
Wonderful. Renée, the archive claims for itself this sense of objectivity. And for those of you who've seen the poem, it has this question-answer form to it, that through these questions and answers, one can get at the heart of the story. But what I like about your poetry is that it fills in those gaps. It tries to fill those silences, and it speaks from the margin. What is your perspective on that? Does the use of redaction in your work ironically speak to the voice and perspective that is present or obscured?
So I don't think when I was creating the work, anything was that conscious. It was as if the work was telling me what it needed, and I had to tune in to what I have been saying in the, there's been interest in the book, and I've been saying this shyly, but now I'm saying it more and more, the sort of voices that were rising up. Very practically, I was using literary practices like the wonderful poet Michael Turner talks about, of collage, of merging things together, of mixing things, and juxtaposition. My mentor, Wade Compton, my mentor, Rachel Rose, Betsy Warland, Ray Sue, they all had me reading and thinking about what can I do with language. And I'm not actually conscious of filling in gaps at all. I like gaps. I like interruptions. This is such an interrupted story. The lives of all these people were so interrupted. So it's interesting to me that, you might see a filling in of the gaps. I don't see that.
It's interesting in a sense because there are these gaps there, and you may not fill them in, but you provide an alternative. The multiplicity of voices is one of the strengths of the work. And one line struck me in particular, this idea of what betrayal occurs with each telling. What betrayals do occur with each telling?
Well, I think this goes to representation. This is a very fine poet, and forgive me, there's so many great poets in the room. I know I'll not see the lights are bright, but Meredith Quartermain, with whom I've studied. I mean, this idea of how do we represent Air India? What does it mean to us? Every time I talk about Air India, outside the language of poetry, it feels blunt, it feels cliche, it feels staged. Betsy Warland introduced me through a KSW reading to an American poet, Rachel Blau Duplessis, and in her long poem, she talks about trace and the importance of trace and not getting too plump with sentimentality. And this is another challenge with these sorts of events. So what betrayals occur to tell an event that can't be told, you know? It's a story that must be told but can't be told, and that's yet another poet. My husband says I make too many referrals to all the poets, but I mean, I stand in the legacy of all this work. The work is informed by all these poets, sadly most of them English language.
Well, that's great how you can situate your work in this genealogy of other writers who are currently working and who come in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
The second poem I'd love you to read is, for those of you who are following along in the audience, on page 83, Subaltern Sutra.
So this is from my Paldi poems, which I know we'll talk about. Exhibit 1906, Subaltern Sutra. Speak about the tatters of history thrown roadside. There is a signal. 1906 comes a man, name redacted. He is India to Canada. He is the lore that is the founding. Let the name stand. Paldi. Unauthorized interjection at the Legislative Library, Victoria, British Columbia, librarian. There's not much here about Paldi. Rag, bit, story, village, empires, jewel, India, colonies, outpost. Sing Cowichan. Of your valley, ask those in Duncan, sister, cousin town, what happened in the woods? Ask, what happened in the woods? Show us the way to Paldi. We never speak of it.
Wonderful, wonderful. For those of you who don't know, Paldi is this small town on the island, and it has this unique intercultural history, named after a village in India, but a lumber town that featured First Nations, Japanese Canadians, South Asian, Chinese Canadians, all working together. And what struck me about this work is that Paldi itself becomes this really sacred space. How do you bring sacred space into your work?
Well, certain places in British Columbia, I think, Haida Gwaii, places along the Fraser River, certainly for me, Paldi, exert a kind of gravitational pull. I do feel it is a kind of sacred place. And one of the things in the poem, and I hope when you buy the book you'll see this, on page 83, all the First Nation names, which of course I don't know, I don't speak, I can't pronounce, have been redacted and struck out. And so that silence you heard me say was respectful, you know, what I haven't earned to know. And so for me, Paldi is, it's like a holy place. And I had this great privilege to be invited into the temple there by Joan Cameron Mayo, invited into her home. She gave me prasad at the reading of the scriptures. And a very fine woman shared her book. It's all mentioned in the acknowledgments. So then we have this terrible thing that happened. When I'm reading much later, and during this process, I'm reading all these thousands of pages of documents. You know, there's over 17,000 pages of documents from the Air India Inquiry alone. And I begin to see this phrase repeated all the time. In the woods outside Duncan. In the woods outside Duncan. And that phrase to this day fills me with dread. In the woods outside Duncan. And it took me a long time to realize that was outside of Paldi. Paldi, as the book says, is a cousin town to Duncan. And there are people who born and grew up in Duncan, they never heard of Paldi. Now why would that be? I see a beloved mentor way at the back. What would that be about?
For those of you who haven't gone to Paldi, as Renee mentioned, there's only there a Gurdwara. And you drive down this dirt road and you see a Nishan Sahib, a pole with the Khalsa flag on it. And all there is this Gurdwara. And you go there and there's a small priest who's there, very much like Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom, or the third movie, where this one person sort of all by himself, lonesome, just being there. And Paldi holds that idea of sacredness, this historical connection to a place. But how did you enter into awareness of Paldi in the first place?
Yes. So, New Westminster, my hometown, I'm at the Heritage Grill and, the bar. And the bar owner there is an amazing man who supports all kinds of culture. And his name is Paul Minhas. And we get into a conversation, and I don't remember what spurred it. But, we did the usual, like even brown person to brown person, where are you from? And I know we had that kind of an exchange. And he said, well, actually, my family is from this town, Paldi. And as soon as I heard the word Paldi, something twigged in my mind. And that's a pun because Alan Twigg has been very helpful in getting me all kinds of information about Paldi. And so I thought, Paldi, wait a second. And then that's how it started, like in a bar.
Yeah. And there's a whole section of the book devoted to this idea of Paldi and Duncan.
Yeah, and again, it was very terrible what happened, that the people who planted the bomb tried to be in the temple, and there's a whole saga in the Air India story that's partially represented, partly imaginatively and partly fictionally, and partly the facts of it are in the book about what people who wanted to plant bombs on the planes did to that holy space. And so one of the things I've appreciated so much, Naveen, of your reading of the work is an understanding that, we tend to sometimes, I think, camouflage these things. And we might as well bring them out in the open.
Mm. The next poem we want to read is called Exhibit 1 on page 33.
Did you want to say a few words about the poem before I read it? I sort of have to ease myself into it.
Sure. Exhibit 1 is a series of poems that go through different numbered exhibits. And each of them is evocative in its own way. And I encourage you all to purchase a book to get to your own feelings from it. But they're personal, they're dealing with memory and remembrance and how to remember. And in some respects, the trauma of remembrance.
Exhibit 1. She boards the plane, Indo-Canadian, this hybrid condition grown into her bones. Situation, first solo journey. Baggage left behind, sister, age 11. She is your queen, shimmering 15-year-old you. Love, hate, love, the night before Air India Flight 182, bad dreams propel. There you are, together in the bedroom. And sweat on your foreheads. Coroner's report, black hair matted and wound around a 23-centimeter metal bar toward the back of the skull. After the news, a sister's inventory, hair, skin, cheekbones, one ankle scarred, cross-hatched, the time she fell off her bike. It was summer then, too. Where are your parents? They will leave you when they go in search of her body.
Renee, one of the most moving things I find about this poem is the juxtaposition, the idea of private remembrance played out in public spheres, but also how things are remembered. There is this legalese that weaves itself throughout the poem, and they're always contrasted by this very personal memory. Tell me how you brought in these alternative voices. What role do you think it serves?
The role of the voices is so hard for me to talk about, in a very practical way. It was going through pages and pages of documents and sitting and being with them day after day. I would set myself a schedule for the reading through of court documents, inquiry documents, books, reporters' journals. And slowly, usually in the morning or late at night, the voices of these 82 children under the age of 13 just started to make themselves felt. I'll leave it at that for the voices of the children. And then, trained as a lawyer, it took me a long time to figure out, well, how am I going to use language to tell this story? And my mentors, Wade Compton and Rachel Rose, really helped me, and they gave me books to look at how poets do these things, particularly with public trauma. And so this idea was to kind of riff in an imaginative way with the legal process. And I wonder, there'll be lawyers in the room, and as a former lawyer, it's not accurate what I'm doing with the law. It's a play. It's a riff. It's perhaps a subversion, and so this constant kind of push-pull between private and public, I think, is part of the journey, the story of public trauma, particularly murder. Like, the loss of even one life is too much, but any one of you who have lost a loved one to murder, right? And murder on a bigger scale, that violence creates a kind of habitat, is the only way I can describe it. And so these portraits of the dead, these elegies, right? They're like a conversation with the dead. Yeah.
Renée, I'd love to ask you more questions about this, but I know there is time and we want people to buy the books as well too. But there is one final poem I'd like you to read. And this, in a sense, is the first time that Renée will be reading this poem in public. It's entitled Canada, and it's on page 48.
I'm going to actually stand up. It's a little bit longer. I really have to thank Silas for believing in this work. Some of these poems really needed a collaboration that he provided, and this is one of them, I think. C-A-N-A-D-A. In the aftertime always there is also the before. June 23rd, 1985, punctured, probed, embedded, sediments, other people's stories, cracks within cracks, tales, anecdotes, gossip, family legend, tied knots, twist. In ends, left gut, nation. In her, a body of provinces. When she walks down to the river, each story bit, a laceration. Inside her, deep down, secrets dismembered, one limb after another, incident as saga, saga as tragedy, tragedy as occurrence. So what? A plane explodes. So what? People die. They die every day. In her body, blast and counterblast. Air India Flight 182. Her story and the stories of other people interact. A toxin? Alloy? Mixed suffering? Name the Ukraine. Find the Doukhobors, ferret out head taxes, also Cambodia, Ireland, the bombing of Britain, Guernica, Dresden, Gaza, Afghanistan, Khmer, Ararat. Such entries in any list incomplete. Auschwitz. Shh, shh. Each name releases vibrations. Komagata Maru. Internment and confiscation, words tremble. This cornered saga litter, suppressing action, accumulation, and there is N. Down at the river, lumber on the docks, metal underground, salmon on the pier. How the dates such flies buzz. 1888, 1910, 1945, 1947, 1967, 1985. Also add 1907, 1911, 1914, 1962, 1997, and after. Scandal and song rise up, Air India portal. The river a conduit, each comer's story a stain on a shack, lean-to, split-level house, hall, lodge, grocery mart, train station, bridge, railroad, condo tower, SkyTrain tracks, emanating messages, hoarded in hoax nation, a taking and a taking this country, receiver of peoples, and always underneath the everlasting story, This is how we suffered, list each band, tribe, linguistic group, hereditary chief. No accounting with those names, not released to her because not student enough, not seeker enough, not listener enough. Each tale incoming, woven, unending saga. Citizens, settlers, First Nations, neighbors, families, loners, saints, and thieves. Liars and fine, upstanding sons, daughters as receptacles, holding, C-A-N-A-D-A, once she sang.
Renée, you mentioned this idea of juxtaposition, and we mentioned how we talked about T.S. Eliot in the past, and my reading of this entire text is one of, there is this hegemonic narrative of the Air India that comes through the legal document. What you've done so brilliantly is deconstruct that entire text and rework it in your own way, through collage, through satire, through subversion, through parody. In a way, creating an alternative document that should be read in tandem or as comment to that document. And what a stellar way of looking at that idea of the Air India. Tell me, one thing that stands out for me is this idea of dating, and as well, along with that, how these stories of trauma go across different communities. Tell us about the idea of connection, communication.
Well, I think that it's a tricky thing. On the one hand, you want to connect things that might not seem like they are connected, and on the other, you want to avoid a too easy meaning making, a too easy merging. Oh, we're all in this together, and I was constantly trying to be open to both connection and respect, which hopefully this poem embodies.
Renée, I want to thank you once again for reading your poems to us. And Renée will be back, of course, shortly, but we'll give her a break from reading her poetry. Renée Sarojini, everyone. I'd now like to call upon the stage Steve Agopian. Steve. At the age of 11, Steve started classical guitar and music interpretation at the Music Conservatory of Beirut, Lebanon. Afterwards, he moved to Canada at the age of 17 and furthered his guitar studies under the guidance of Bruce Clausen of UBC and Stephen Boswell. Since then, he has attended various music classes in Hungary, France, and Greece, where he has also performed and received several recognitions and awards in performing new pieces never heard on classical guitar. Tonight's first piece is an Armenian prayer. Armenia is the first Christian nation, based its liturgy on pre-Christian era hymns. According to Jose Ramirez, designer and maker of the modern Spanish classical guitar, this instrument traces its design and roots to the pre-Christian Armenia. So very possibly today's music might be 2,000 years old. The second piece is entitled Lagrima, Teardrop, by Spanish composer Francisco Terrega. Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Agopian. Thank you so much, Steve. We've now come to the final section of the evening, entitled the Air India Translations. The Air India Translations is a segment of the evening that deals with a common or major theme of Renée's work, one of language. Here we will feature the languages of those who died on the plane, the act of translation represented by the work, and the displacement of English. If you have a copy of the book, I encourage you all to follow along because the readings will take place in English, French, and Punjabi. I'd like to encourage or call upon the stage the performers of this segment, one of whom is Elodie Jackie. Elodie Jackie is a professional wanderer and wonderer. A mother of two, she is also a doula, a prenatal educator, an environmentalist, and a radio host. As a former behavioral biologist, she still enjoys obscure scientific papers, as well as poetry and anything written in half-decent prose. Elodie Jackie. I'd also like to introduce to the stage Balkaran Singh. Balkaran was recently just a volunteer and activist employed in nonprofits, but who, after much convincing from those around him, has finally been made to really realize and now occasionally admits that he is a writer. Balkaran Singh. And once again, I'd like to invite to the stage Renée Sarojini Saklikar.
Exposé, 1985. Trois-Rivières. S'il y a de l'anglais, c'est pour eux. Action. 3 jeunes femmes se font des amies québécoises, apprennent le français, jouent dans la neige. Désir et manque. Maison, Québec, Inde. Frontière. Français, anglais, punjabi. Mer. Dans une ruelle glacée, la neige entassée, haute, lourde, humide. Une femme en sari et courtes bottes négocie son chemin, un pied devant l'autre, doucement. Un talon levé, puis abaissé. Une main comme pour atteindre quelque chose. Quoi ? L'air. Elle agrippe la soie, action comme une jointure, où l'hiver s'achève, son tissu commence. Sœur, regarde, regarde-moi, je suis un ange de neige, mes bras, des ailes. Statue, mère et sœur décédées.
Exhibit 1985, Trois-Rivières. If there is English, it is for E. Action. 3 young women make friends with Quebecois girls, learn French, play games in the snow. Longing, home, Quebec, India, border, French, English, Punjabi. Mother. On an icy side street, snow packed high and heavy, wet. A woman in a sari and short boots negotiates her path 1 foot before another, slow. Heel raised, then down. One hand as if to reach for something. What? The air? She grasps at silk. Action is juncture. Where winter ends, her fabric begins. Sister, look. Look at me. I'm a snow angel. My arms. Wings. Status. Mother and sister, deceased.
नमूना 1985 त्रै दरिया जे इंग्लिश है तां ई कर्म 3 जुगनियां कबैकवा कुड़ियां नूं सहेलदियां फ्रांसीसी सिੱਖਦੀਆਂ चिट्टी बर्फ खेडदियां चौना करदी कबैक भारत सीमा फ्रांसीसी अंग्रेजी ते पंजाबी मां तिलकदी गिल्ली भारी बर्फ च दफनाई एक गली दे विच इक औरत साड़ीदार ਤੇ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਨਿੱਕੇ ਜੁੱਤੇ ਰਾਹ ਵੱਟਦੀ ਇੱਕ ਪੈਰ ਦੂਜੇ ਮਗਰ ਧੀਮਾ ਧੀਮਾ ਅੱਡੀ ਉੱਪਰ ਫੇਰ ਥੱਲੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਵਸਤੂ ਲਈ ਪੁੱਜਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਹੱਥ ਕਾਹਦੇ ਲਈ ਹਵਾ ਰੇਸ਼ਮ ਨੂੰ ਥਾਮਦੀ ਕਰਮ ਦਾ ਇਹ ਅਹਿਮ ਮੋੜ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਪੋਹ ਦਾ ਖਾਤਮਾ ਉਹਦਾ ਸੁੱਤਨ ਸ਼ੁਰੂਆਤ ਭੈਣ ਦੇਖ ਭੈਣੇ ਦੇਖ ਬਰਫੀਲੀ ਪਰੀ ਹਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਪੰਖ ਨੇ ਬਾਹਾਂ ਮੇਰੀਆਂ ਉਹਦਾ ਮਾਂ ਤੇ ਭੈਣ ਦਾ ਅੰਤ
Interjection non autorisée. L'équipe du coroner légiste note expurger, expurger, expurger et expurger. Démembrée. Blessures externes. Elle était endormie avec une légère entaille bosse sur le nez. Elle était endormie avec une légère entaille sur le nez. Elle était endormie avec une légère entaille sur le nez. Une couleur plus intense. L'océan retient. Expurger, expurger, expurger et expurger.
Unauthorized interjection. Coroner's team. Notes. Name redacted, name redacted, name redacted, and name redacted. Dismembered. External injuries. She was asleep with a slight dent on her nose. A deeper color the ocean holds. External injuries. Abrasions reviewed. Nose penetrated. Maxillary antrum. Femur. Forearm. Heel. Abdomen. Wounded. Unauthorized
non
interjection.
L'équipe
Coroner's
du
team.
coroner légiste note
Name redacted.
expurger,
Name
expurger,
redacted.
expurger
Name redacted.
et
And
expurger.
name redacted.
Démembrée.
Dismembered.
Blessures
External
externes.
injuries.
Elle
She was
était
asleep
endormie
with a
avec
slight
une légère
dent on her
entaille
nose.
bosse sur le nez. Elle
A
était
deeper
endormie
color
avec une
the
légère
ocean
entaille
holds.
sur le nez. Elle
External
était endormie
injuries.
avec une légère entaille sur le
Abrasions
nez.
reviewed.
Une couleur
Nose
plus intense.
penetrated.
L'océan
Maxillary
retient.
antrum.
Expurger,
Femur,
expurger,
forearm,
expurger et
Abdomen wounded.
expurger.
Exhibit. The sensor that is time inserts this sutra, also raga and unauthorized, a tabla. Strings of a sitar body encodes fable, June
June
23rd, 1985.
ਜੂਨ ਦੀ ਤਰੀਕ 23 1985 ਜੇ ਸਾਹ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਤਾਂ ਅੱਗ ਹੋਣੀ ਸੀ ਜੇ ਦਾਤ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਤਾਂ ਤਾਂਬਾ ਜੇ ਪੱਥਰ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਤਾਂ ਅਨਮੋਲਾ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰ ਸਮੇਂ ਦੇ ਦੌਰ 'ਚ ਡੂੰਘਾ ਪਾਣੀ ਕਿੱਕਲ ਦੀ ਜੁਗਨੀ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਡੁੱਬਾ ਕਿੱਥੇ ਰੂਹ ਦੀ ਅੰਬੜੀ 'ਚ ਡੂੰਘ ਸਮੁੰਦਰ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰ ਸਮੇਂ ਦੇ ਦੌਰ 'ਚ ਕਿੱਕਲ ਦੀ ਜੁਗਨੀ
June 23rd, 1985, taking and taken. This girl, name redacted, from this family, name redacted. Officers of the court record a lineage old as iron.
ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੀਆਂ ਪੱਧਰੀਆਂ ਪੈਲੀਆਂ ਤੇ ਪਹਾੜੀ ਹਿਮਾਚਲ ਦੀ ਪਹਿਲੀ ਪੌੜੀ ਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਵਗਦੀ ਵਾਹ ਜੇ ਕੁਝ ਹੈ ਤਾਂ ਮਾਹੌਲ ਦੀ ਖਾਮੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਵਕਤ ਦੇ ਮਗਰਲਾ ਸਮਾਂ ਹਮੇਸ਼ਾ ਅਤੇ ਜਿਸ ਦਾ ਨਾਂ ਗੁਪਤ ਜੋ ਰੂਹ ਹੈ ਅਤੇ ਨੱਚਦੀ ਜੁਗਨੀ ਵੰਡਤੀ ਗਈ ਤੇ ਬਣੀ ਭੈਣ ਤੇ ਸਾਹ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ
And their breath, now Chinook. Ah, spring in winter, if there is a city, it is name redacted. Oh, officialdom. List the names, the girls dance, find them in the time that it is always June 23rd, 1985.
उड़ान
This is a
182
morning
ਦੀਆਂ
song for all the
ਨਿੱਕੀਆਂ ਜਾਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਇਹ
children of the
ਗੀਤ
Air
ਹੈ
India Flight
ਬਾਦਸ਼ਾਹ ਹਕੂਮਤ ਦੀ
182
ਇਹ ਉਡਨ ਸਵਾਰੀ
airplane of the Emperor
Kanishka.
Kanishka.
Thank you for a wonderful and heartwarming performance. We've come to the end of the evening, and I would invite Renée to come there or come here to say one final poem. Renée Sarojini Saklikar.
Ghost Sutra. Another sentencing hearing begins in Vancouver on Wednesday for name redacted. To me, my countrymen, of what you did and never will do, from the island town of Duncan St. Baldy, province where we live, there are the songs of Canada, India, of what we are, what we've become. The only man ever convicted in connection with the Air India bombing. Sing to me, children, of what you were, and now, restless and traveling, we will never hear him say the truth. My countrymen, minutes and hours jailed with you. Some family members of those killed in the Air India bombing plan to be in the courtroom. Aunt, uncle, sing of what you were and will be. 1985 and after. Water, wind, child and limb, bomb and island. Air India rock, where cuts the rain. Air India rock, where cuts the rain. For my husband, without whom. For my father. Absent, still present. For my mother and for my sister, we never speak of it. For Irfan.
Thank you to all of you for joining us today for the launch of Children of Air India. And thank you, Renée, for sharing your work with us today. Yes, for sure. By way of thank yous, I'd also like to thank Elodie, Balkaran, Steve, Silas, Andrea, Shyla, Cameron, and Jessica, as well as the whole team here at SFU, the ushers, and all of you who have come. I invite you all now to, if you haven't already, purchase a copy of Children of Air India, and Renée will be here at this table to sign the copies for you. And by way of conclusion, why not have the dialogues you have with each other and with Renée complete the night? Thank you so much for coming.